The frightening spectacle that greets rescuers when boarding ghost ships is that there is always a familiar pattern. That is, everything on board the ship appears untouched, where food was either still being prepared or was placed on the table, along with a beverage ready to be consumed. The ship's instruments are still in place, as well as everyone's belongings. In some circumstances, lifeboats are still on board, along with safety jackets. Everything was looking perfectly normal, except there was one important thing missing in this description: the crew, who for whatever inexplicable reason had vanished, never to be seen again. The following are 6 terrifying mysteries involving ghost ships whose crews all went missing in mysterious circumstances and were never seen again and was never solved. Number 6. Seabird, 1750. In 1750, a 300-ton merchant ship called Seabird was on its way back to its home port of Newport, Rhode Island, after a trip to Honduras under the command of Captain John Durham. The ship was spotted drifting listlessly off the Rhode Island coast before running aground on Eastern Beach. The Seabird seemed to be in perfect working condition. When it was boarded, the ship's dog happily greeted the crew, and there was also a cat aboard, where both of the animals were in perfect health, relaxed and well fed and uninjured. However, these were the only 2 remaining living things on this ship, as there was no crew aboard. Strangely though, there were signs that the crew had just recently been there. A freshly prepared breakfast was set out on the table, coffee was boiling in a pot, and there was even the smell of recent tobacco smoke pervading the air. In the captain's quarters, they found a large stash of coins just lying untouched. The ship itself was completely undamaged, and its cargo was totally intact and properly secured. Wherever the crew had gone, they'd gone there in a hurry. But what had happened to them? The weather was calm and clear. It had been broad daylight. The ship was in perfect working order, and another boat captain would claim that he had passed the Seabird just 2 hours before the ship was found abandoned and seen Captain Durham on deck, and they had waved at each other with no sign of anything even slightly amiss. The only possible clue seemed to be the fact that the ship's longboat was missing, although a smaller boat was still there. There was also a note written in the captain's log which read, "Branton Reef sighted," which is located not far from Newport. The mystery has never been solved, and no trace of the crew of the Seabird, nor the missing longboat, was ever found. Number 5. Mary Celeste, 1872. The Mary Celeste was an American merchant ship discovered adrift and deserted in the Atlantic Ocean off the Azores Islands, Portugal, on December 5, 1872. The Canadian ship De Gracia found her in a dishevelled but seaworthy condition with a lifeboat missing. The last entry in her log was dated 10 days earlier. She had left New York City en route to Genoa in Italy on November the 7th, 1872. On board were Benjamin Sooner Briggs, one of the owners and the ship's captain, his first mate Albert Richardson, the captain's wife Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 6 crewmen, all considered to be experienced and trustworthy. When discovered, she still had 6 months' provision of food and water still on board, and the captain and crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. However, one thing was clear: those on board had abandoned the vessel in a hurry. One major theory as to what happened is that something happened on the Mary Celeste that made the captain panic, where he then ordered the crew to get onto the lifeboat and abandon ship. The rope was then tied to the lifeboat, and the captain and his crew trailed behind the Mary Celeste to see what would happen to her. The panic had possibly turned out to be a false alarm, but unfortunately for Captain Briggs, his family and crew, the rope must have snapped during the raging storm, and they were unable to get themselves back to the Mary Celeste, or quite possibly the lifeboat was overturned in the storm and they all drowned. Whatever the speculation as to what happened to those who had been on board, they were never seen or heard from again. The inconclusive hearings fostered much speculation and fantasy, from seaquakes, waterspouts, attacked by a giant squid, or that they were abducted by aliens. Number 4. The Resolven, 1884. The Welsh ship the Resolven was travelling between Canada and Wales with a cargo of fish and timber under the command of Master Mariner John James. In August of 1884, the Royal Navy vessel HMS Mallard was patrolling off of Trinity Bay, Newfoundland, when they spotted the Resolven aimlessly adrift. All attempts to hail the ship went unanswered, and it was decided to go in and investigate the wandering vessel. When the Resolven was boarded, it was found that no one was aboard, although there was clear signs of recent activity all around. In the galley, there was food and drinks carefully laid out on tables for a meal, and even a fire burning. There was no sign of damage to the ship or any evidence of a struggle, and everything seemed as if someone would be returning at any moment. The only thing out of place were a missing lifeboat, and a small fortune in coins was also found to be missing. Other than that, everything was normal. The missing coins may point to foul play, but they also may have been just taken along by the captain when he left the ship, for whatever reason that may have been. The crew has never been found. The reasons for why they would so suddenly abandon the ship was never resolved, and the case is so mysterious that the Resolven has been sometimes referred to as the Welsh Mary Celeste. Number 3. J.C. Cousins, 1883. The J.C. Cousins was a 66-foot luxury schooner that operated out of Astoria, New York, guiding boats around the treacherous sandbars of the Columbia River. On October 6, 1883, the J.C. Cousins went out to anchor off Peacock Spit near the entrance of the river, where they would wait to aid any ships that were in need. Later that afternoon, the J.C. Cousins was seen to be behaving strangely by a tugboat called the Mary Taylor. Crew of the tugboat observed that the schooner was on the move, which seemed strange as there was no ships in the area, and so no one would have needed their help at that time. Even stranger still was that instead of moving through the ample calm water all around, the boat was heading straight to an area where there were dangerous breakers. Fortunately, the J.C. Cousins made it through the breakers, then headed out towards the open sea. But then, in another strange move, started to turn around to head back. But then, in another strange twist, turned again to head back out towards the ocean. It was bizarre behaviour, and the boat continued to go back and forth in this manner until nightfall. When morning came, it was found to be in this continuous loop, presumably having done so all night long. At this stage, spectators had gathered on the shore, looking confused and bewildered at what was going on. J.C. Cousins continued this loop until around 1 p.m, when it finally ran aground on a sandbar and fell on its side like an exhausted animal. Because the tide was still high, no one was able to board the ailing ship, and there was no sign of any crew attempting to exit the ship. The J.C. Cousins just sat there lifeless upon the beach. When the boat was finally boarded, it was found to be deserted. The lifeboats were missing, and some of the paperwork was missing as well. So, had the crew intentionally abandoned the vessel? And if this is the case, how is it they were not seen, even though the boat had gone out to its position as normal and had been visible the whole time? Other theories as to the crew's disappearance was that they were murdered to eliminate competition. Other ideas were that there'd been a mutiny for some reason, or that they'd been kidnapped. Other bizarre notions were that they'd been attacked by a sea monster, or could have been the victims of a ghost ship that was rumoured to prowl the area. One old local claimed to have seen a phantom vessel stalking them. But these were just wild conjectures. To this day, it is not known what happened to the crew of the JC Cousin, or at what point they exited the boat, or why. Number 2. Carroll A. Deering, 1920. The Carroll A. Deering was a schooner which departed from Norfolk, Virginia on September the 8th, 1920, on its way to deliver a cargo of coal to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The cargo was delivered in late November. The schooner then headed back on December the 2nd, stopping off at Barbados to pick up supplies on January the 9th. At this stage, everything went according to schedule, but then things started to get strange. During the ship's stop in Barbados, there'd been growing friction between one of the crew and the ship's captain, Captain W.B. Wormel. According to First Mate Charles B. McClellan, the frustration stemmed from the fact that Captain Wormel, who had been a last-minute replacement for a William M. Merritt who was suddenly taken ill, seemed to be an incompetent leader. First Mate McClellan and Wormel did not get along, and things became so heated between the two in Barbados that McClellan had threatened the captain's life, leading him to being arrested and detained. In all of this chaos, the Carroll A. Deering still sailed from Barbados on its way to becoming another great maritime mystery. A few weeks after its departure, a transmission was picked up from the ship by the Cape Lookout lightship, during which time a man with a foreign-sounding accent allegedly explained the ship had lost one of its anchors. The captain of the Cape Lookout lightship claimed that the crew of the Carroll A. Deering had been acting oddly and wandering about on the deck as if in an agitated state. Then, just 2 days later, on the morning of January the 31st, 1921, the ship was found drifting aimlessly off the coast of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, where it became stuck on a sandbar. When the ship was boarded by the Coast Guard, they found the vessel to be completely empty, with no sign of any of the crew members, and in addition it was found that all of the lifeboats, the navigation equipment and the crew's belongings were gone as well. The only thing left behind was a half-prepared meal, as if they'd all abandoned ship in a hurry. There were other oddities as well, where the captain's personal quarters had 3 different sets of footprints littering the floor, possibly indicating that there had been intruders. On the captain's deck was a navigational chart, which, starting from January the 23rd, had suddenly changed to a completely different person's handwriting. Other than that, there were no clues at all as to what could have happened to the crew, and no trace of them was ever found. There have been many theories as to what became of the crew of the Carroll A. Deering, where the most rational explanation seems to be that there'd been a mutiny aboard, as Captain Wormel had apparently not been the most popular guy among his crew, and he and his first mate had been at each other's throats since Barbados. But if there'd been a mutiny, why would they have abandoned a perfectly good ship in the lifeboats along with all their gear? Other theories claim that they were attacked by pirates or smugglers, that they had all vanished in the region of the Bermuda Triangle. Nevertheless, it remains as yet another enduring sea mystery. Number 1. The Cats 2, 2007. Not all nautical mysteries happened in the dark past. There are also modern shipping mysteries, and none more so than what happened on April the 20th, 2007. The Cats 2 was a 9.8 metre catamaran that was discovered drifting off the coast of eastern Australia near the Great Barrier Reef, with its engine still running. When authorities boarded the ship, they found no one aboard, yet all of the life jackets were accounted for, the radio was fully operational, a smaller escape boat was still tied up and secured, and food was set out on the table for a meal. The laundry was hanging out to dry, fishing lines were laid out, there was even a laptop computer sitting on a table, open and turned on. Nothing appeared to be missing, with even a firearm and ammunition left behind in a box. The interior of the boat was neat and tidy. There was no sign of struggle or foul play. The yacht appeared to be in good order, and the whole scene was eerily calm and normal, except for the fact there was no one there. The Cats 2 had been headed for Townsville, and that there had been 3 crew members consisting of Derek Batten, 56, and friends Peter Tunstead, 69, and James Tunstead, 63, all of whom were from Perth, Western Australia. The trio had apparently departed from Airlie Beach off the Queensland coast in Eastern Australia and had planned to head out from Townsville to embark on an ambitious voyage up around the northern coast to end up back home in Western Australia, a destination they would never reach. A video taken by the crew dated April 15th, 2007 was found, which showed the three men on the deck of the ship apparently enjoying themselves and not under any sort of duress. The only potential clues that could really be gleaned from the video was that the seas seemed to be somewhat choppy and the men were not wearing life jackets. There was an intensive search for the missing men using both boats and aircraft, which scoured the region of the last named GPS coordinates of the vessel on both land and sea, utilising advanced equipment such as infrared systems up and down the coastline. Despite these massive efforts, no trace for the missing men was found, and it was feared that they had not survived. So, what happened to the crew of the Cas 2? The crew were experienced mariners and had been on many trips aboard the Cas 2 without incident. The boat was also reported to have been in good condition and perfectly seaworthy with no prior problems. The official theory was that the crew of the Cas 2 had been swept overboard either by a sudden gust of wind or rough seas, but this is not known for sure, and indeed the pristine state of the cabin does not seem to suggest such a sudden jarring tragedy or drenched interior. There was also no sign that any of the life-saving gear had been equipped or taken, and no distress call, which would mean that if such an incident had really occurred, that it must have dispatched all three of them with alarming swiftness. There was also the idea that the Cas 2 may have run aground on a sandbar, and when the crew had disembarked to free it, they'd been washed out to sea. Now there is a theory that the Cas 2 met with some other vessel and they went on board only to be kidnapped. However, all of these ideas are wild speculation. The only thing everyone appears to have agreed upon is that there was no obvious evidence at all that foul play had been involved aboard the vessel. Yet another perplexing conundrum that follows a similar pattern to so many other sea mysteries.